We have some breaking news from the NHL. They've released more details on an agreement reached between the league and the players on the playoff format. Plus, we also have some odd news out of the Ottawa Senators organization, and I want to take a look at some off-season rumblings involving the Montreal Canadiens and the Philadelphia Flyers. We'll jump into all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a variety of things to discuss today. Let's kick things off with the breaking news from the NHL. Various NHL insiders, including Elliot Friedman, were putting this information out on Twitter just a short time ago. It does appear that the league and the Players Association have come to terms on a few more key details for the NHL's return to play for their 2014 playoff format. Of course, we had already had a big press release not that long ago from Gary Bettman outlining most of the framework, but there were still a few details that had to be ironed out, and we have a few more of those pieces of information now, including how it's going to work, the opening round and qualifying round, which essentially is not really a playoff round, but they play in or qualifying round, whatever we're going to choose to call it, is definitely going to be a best of 5. We knew that, but the remaining rounds were not completely determined. But now we know that all rounds after that will be a best out of 7 series, and we also learned that it's not going to be a bracket approach. We're going to be reseeding after each and every round all the way through to the end. So obviously that's going to play a big role here, and that was something that the players lobbied for. They wanted the reseeding approach, and they wanted best out of 7 series, and they got their way in this case here with the league. Now, it's one thing important to note here. Chris Johnston noted on Twitter regarding this information. There was talk about maybe doing the first or second round of the playoffs of best of 5 instead of best out of 7. Doing the best out of 7 all the way through will add approximately 9 to 10 days to the playoff format, how long it's going to take to play everything out. And of course, that could have an impact, depending if there was a potential another outbreak of COVID-19 or anything else that could impact things while return to play is taking place. So hopefully that doesn't happen, of course, but it will certainly make things a little bit longer to get things played through. So obviously that's some big news from the NHL on their return to play format. They're still expecting to go through with phase 2 of the return to play action plan, which should be kicking in, I believe, within the next week and a half or so. I think it was about June the 14th was their target date. Phase 3, of course, will involve the mini training camps, which we're still hoping to take place somewhere around the middle of July. So obviously that's some big news, important stuff. As we mentioned before, another important note, that the top 4 teams in each conference are going to be doing a round-robin style of a little mini tournament to kind of get themselves ready for the playoffs and determine the seeds for the top 4. They're guaranteed 1 through 4, but they have to determine that order. They're not basing it on just regular season standings, so they'll play all each other one time, so 3 games apiece, and if there are any ties to determine the order, they're going to use the points percentage that they had during the regular season to break any ties there. So I guess we'll see. And of course, I've been running polls on our community tab, which many of you have been voting on who you thought out of the top 4 teams were going to be winning that and coming out as the top seed. So if you haven't already cast your vote, please go do so, because I will be using this information here along with those results to make some additional playoff predictions that we're going to do here as a community. So go ahead and check that out if you haven't already done so. Now, we have a few other quick little tidbits as well, mainly on players coming possibly over to the NHL from Russia, from the KHL. There has been some talk that defenseman Nikita Nesterov might be making an NHL return, and right now it looks as though he's mainly linked to the Los Angeles Kings, so that's a possibility. Of course, it's been about 3 years, I believe, since he's played in the NHL. He's been playing in the KHL during that time. Formerly played with the Tampa Bay Lightning and briefly with the Montreal Canadiens. So we'll see if they makes the return. But like I said, right now it's being linked to Los Angeles if he does indeed come over. There's also another quick update as well on Isles prospect goalie Ilya Sorokin, who they've been waiting for quite some time. There is some talk he could stay in Russia, as I mentioned before, but a lot of that has to do with the sudden rule change in the NHL. Obviously, a lot of these players want to play and sign their contracts and play during this summer tournament, and right now they're not letting them do that. So clearly, if for some of these players, they're going to have to wait a long time if they have to wait for the 2020 season to start, because they're looking like that's probably not going to start anywhere from December, maybe November at the earliest, but more likely a December or January start time. The NHL is clearly going to want to hold off as long as they can to get fans in attendance to increase their revenue. So that's not going to bode well for guys who are going to have a super long layoff. So if they can play over in Europe or in the KHL, and obviously they're going to do so because they're going to be able to make money sooner, get back on the ice, get some action, etc. So we'll see what happens, but there is talks between Sorokin and the CSKA to continue on with a new contract there, but it's not signed yet. He's keeping his options open. He has not closed the door on signing with the Islanders. Key detail that teams are still, trying to sort out with the league. If they can get a ruling from the NHL that players can sign and play this summer, then that'll change things quite a bit for many of these players who are looking to make the jump to the NHL and want to sign and play immediately. Now, as I mentioned as well, we have some odd news from the Senators organization. It's been a long time since they've had any kind of weird news or anything negative with the organization. But right now, we had a statement earlier this afternoon put out on Twitter, which I'll post up here for you to have a quick look at. I know Ian Mendez of TSN, who covers the Senators for many years, was one of the first to speak out on this on social media. Basically, it says that the Sens Foundation, their charitable organization, which is not directly owned by the Senators, but has been working in partnership with the Senators for a long, long time, is going to be ending that partnership with the Senators effective August the 1st. So it's kind of an odd thing to see. Obviously, you don't really see something like this happen really ever. I mean, it's kind of an odd thing. You can't help but wonder if there's some kind of a rift between Melnyk and those at the top of the foundation. I'm not really sure exactly. There's not a lot of details going on right now being released, but all we know is that after August 1st, the foundation is still going to exist. They can still continue their work. They're just not going to be an official partnership with the Ottawa Senators organization, so it's probably going to make things quite challenging to continue. They've done a lot of great work for the community in the Ottawa area, and certainly if the foundation doesn't continue on, it would be a big loss for them. So it's really another puzzling thing here. I really don't know what to think of this, what to make of it. We'll have to wait for more details as they emerge, but clearly I've already seen some people speculating on maybe Melnyk is selling the team and moving them or something to that effect, and I really don't think we have any reason to think that is something that's going to be going down. Really, just because there's a rift between, just because something's changed here between the foundation and the team, that really, we would have had other news. There's something that wouldn't have been able to keep quiet or contain, at least I wouldn't think. So I guess we'll have to remain to be seen for additional details on what caused this. I'm not sure how much of it we'll get, but still some odd news, and we'll hopefully get more on this story as it develops. Now, as I mentioned as well, we want to take a look at some off-season rumblings, mostly involving the Habs and the Flyers. So there's a recent Sportsnet article for Eric Engels on a mailbag type of segment where he's looking at answering some fans' questions. And one of the questions that was asked to Eric Engels was, could Montreal Canadiens go after the top free agent and forward at least Taylor Hall, who certainly would be a major addition to Montreal. Currently with the Arizona Coyotes, he was acquired by them earlier before the trade deadline, a little bit early. They gave up a fair bit to make that happen, and unfortunately for the Coyotes, didn't really get a ton of success afterwards. Be involved in this 2014 playoff format, but otherwise, if the NHL would have been able to complete the season in the standard format would have applied, they would have missed the playoffs. Would have been a big blow to them. They're up really tight against the cap, and as much as we've heard comments lately from Hall saying how he liked it in Arizona, he likes the coaching staff, and there's a lot of pluses, it's certainly going to be very, very difficult, in my opinion, for them to make this happen. They're going to have to shed a lot of salary, even without Hall's contract at all. Like, there's almost next to no room for next year as it stands right now. Not to say that they can't clear some money out. Obviously, they can make some big trades, but it's going to take a lot to get that done, and might prove to be extremely difficult. And plus, we don't know for sure that Taylor Hall wants to stay there. I expect him to say all the right things about the team he's currently working with. You don't really hear too many other comments otherwise, so it's not surprising to hear him say lots of good things. Obviously, he's open to the idea at this point. I think his personal success and the team's success or lack thereof in this little playoff opportunity that's coming up this summer will certainly play a role in his decision, but it would not shock me at all to see him head north of the border if he indeed does leave the Coyotes via free agency this summer. I mean, he's used to playing in Canada. He's done it before for a long time in Edmonton. He knows what these markets are like, and he's one of those top free agents who, in my opinion, is not afraid to have the pressure applied and be in a market where he's in the hot seat all the time. Obviously, some markets like Montreal and Toronto, and many of the Canadian markets especially, like, you don't get away with having a low media coverage. You're dealing with the media all the time. There's constant scrutinizing, and obviously he's, I think, the kind of guy who can deal with that. So I don't think he'd be opposed to it. Not to say that he definitely wants to go there. I have no reason to think that he would or would not be interested, but clearly, in my opinion, he is the kind of player that Montreal really could benefit from. A high-end scorer to play on the wing with some of their top young players in the Habs organization would be a huge thing now. The other big thing here, like I said, is the cap space in Arizona will be detrimental for them to maybe not bring him back, but Montreal is one of those teams who has a lot of flexibility and one of the few teams who would have enough space who could actually go and offer him a top dollar contract and pay him for what he thought he could make before. There's going to be a lot of teams out of the running if he don't move his dollar value, but I know that it's not just about money for him. It's also about having a winning environment and obviously, having some playoff success and getting a chance to compete in the playoffs year after year. And even though Montreal hasn't been doing that recently, they do have a great group of young players to build around. I don't know what his thoughts would be on the possibility and how long it's going to take to get the Habs to be a regular playoff team at this point. Again, I don't think they're too far away myself, but I'm not Taylor Hall and I'm not his agent, so I'm not sure what that can be like for them, for what their opinions would be. But obviously, I would think Marc Bergevin would at least be having conversations to try to see, obviously, when the time is right, when free agency is officially able to take place in a few months' time. But I do think it makes a lot of sense for them to explore that. I know Montreal's had a hard time attracting free agents in recent years, but this could be a major addition for them. All that cap space they've been hoarding lately would be able to be used on a top player like him, would be huge for the organization and could be a big move. So let me know your thoughts, especially if you're a Montreal fan. What do you think of the possibility of adding Taylor Hall? Do you think he's the kind of player that's really missing and needed out there that could really help take them up a major notch in their scoring, a more consistent playoff team, and a guy who can work a lot with their young players to really help mold them for the future? Now, the next player we're going to talk about is a player who's also been linked to Montreal in the past. I don't have any current updated rumors to suggest that talks would still be going on, but my own personal thoughts here do make sense that there would be a player that Montreal would consider as well. There's a new article in the Philadelphia Inquirer from Sam Carchidi discussing the future of Shayne Gostisbehere with the Philadelphia Flyers and how he feels that it is quite likely the Gostisbehere's time with the Flyers could very well end when we hit the offseason. He feels there's a good possibility when play resumes. For obviously the Flyers are going to be a top 4 team. We know they're going to be in the official playoff rounds. That he wouldn't be surprised if Gostisbehere ended up being a healthy scratch during that time. That the other 6 guys that were playing more so have been a healthy scratch before on different occasions before the NHL season was paused. And that the other guys have been playing well as a unit and doesn't see him getting a lot of opportunity. Of course, he still has a pretty reasonable contract if he can get back to playing to where he was a few years ago. He's a great skater, can be good on the power play. Hard to say exactly what happened to his play over the last few years, but I do think a change in scenery might be the best thing for him to get a fresh start. And obviously, a offensively skilled defenseman who's a good skater, good puck mover, who can play the left side would be exactly what Montreal needs. There's been a lot of links between the two in the past. Like I said, I don't have any updated rumors to suggest that there would be having discussion or anything that might be brewing behind the scenes. Obviously, we're a little ways away from the Flyers being able to even make a trade. Based on the article, though, that he felt that if the Gostisbehere were to be moved, that the most likely package coming back would possibly be draft picks. Either they might hold out to try to get a first-round pick, or maybe a second-round pick and something else, or maybe multiple second to third-round picks or something to that effect. Obviously, he also felt the possibility that the Flyers could try to hold out and maybe acquire a 20-goal scoring winger, somebody who can maybe be that middle six type of role. And I'm not really sure if you look at the Montreal roster, what that could be for them. They do have a couple guys who's had some question marks around their future, maybe like a Thomas Tatar, but obviously he doesn't have a lot of time left on his contract, so I'm not sure if that's something the Flyers would go for. But at the same time, you have to think that the Montreal Canadiens have a ton of draft picks. And as we discussed before, teams like Montreal and Ottawa, who've been hoarding lots and lots of draft picks, would have been disappointed had the 2020 NHL draft taken place in June like it was rumored to be for some time, because they wouldn't have been able to make the trades. But they didn't accumulate all these picks to make every single one of them a draft choice, that they likely wanted to use some of them as currency to facilitate trades to improve other areas of the team. And I'm sure with Marc Bergevin and the number of picks that he has in this 2020 draft, he might be able to offer the right kind of package to acquire a guy like Gostisbehere from the Flyers. They still have their first round pick. I don't see him parting with that. Depending on where they are in the draft, I guess maybe, but unlikely for a guy who struggled the last couple of years. I wouldn't think they give up a first for him. But either way, maybe multiple second-round picks might be a possibility, or a second-round pick and something else, either off the roster or a different kind of prospect or something. I don't know what it would take, but there's a whole bunch of different options that Bergevin could put together. Even with everything they have going on, I'm not sure they'd be able to do a Gostisbehere acquisition through trade and a Taylor Hall signing via free agency. Might be able to do one or the other, and maybe not both, though. So obviously, I'd love to know what your thoughts are. If Marc Bergevin had the option of either trading for Gostisbehere or signing Taylor Hall to a lucrative longer-term contract? Which one do you think would make the most sense for them to do? And do you think either of them are realistic for what they have to offer, either through money onto the free agent side or that they have for assets that they could offer the Flyers via trade? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and we'll continue discussing further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.